Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'm your host, Konrad, on Wednesday Night Reviews. And from superheroes to average Joes, here's what I read this week. So I finished up the 6-issue series Group of 7, created by two local Toronto artists. They are Chris Sanagan and Jason Lapidus, the writer and illustrator. And this book is about more than ordinary people. It is about 7 legendary Canadian heroes. So here's our first cover with a nice group shot. 2, 3, 4, 5, and finally, issue 6. And this series is a fantastic story based in World War I, where in reality, in real life, these 7 legendary Canadians were all fighting the war at the same time. With this comic, Chris Sanagan, the writer, crafts an intense and fantastical military story regarding some of the most amazing and legendary Canadians in World War I. It all starts in an Ocean 11's-esque style roundup where 7 ragtag soldiers and individuals of different walks of life are brought together and tasked with this daunting mission. The leader of their pack is none other than John Mccray. Now, the name wasn't familiar to me, and it won't be to many people. However, every Canadian will know In Flanders Fields, the poem written by John Mccray. And in the comic, John is known as a physician, a poet, as well as a dedicated soldier. Within real life, he actually is all of that, and he goes on to be an author, further his surgical career, and serve Canada for many years. The second character we meet in this group of 7 is none other than Francis Peggy Pegamogabo, who is credited in the comic as being the most effective sniper in the war front, as well as being critical in bringing information to and from the front, which led to many successful campaigns. In real life, Peggy was in fact the deadliest sniper in all of World War I, the most highly decorated indigenous soldier, and among some of the most decorated soldiers, period. Even after the war, he would go on to be an indigenous rights activist and the chieftain of his local band called the Perry Island Band, which has since then been renamed. And he was truly a legendary man. He's had many statues brought up and erected of himself. He's been put into the Indigenous Hall of Fame and many other acclaims. And he's just one of the many amazing people in this group. The third soldier that we meet in this group of 7 is none other than Lester B Pearson. Now, if the name isn't familiar, that's all right, because in the comic, all he's really known for is being a young 19-year-old soldier who's had missions and special operations throughout the world at the moment, but no true experience, and not much else is known other than him being athletic and having a good mind. In reality, that was true of Lester B. Pearson, and he would go on to serve Canada as its 14th Prime Minister, as well as receiving the Nobel Peace Prize in 1957. The fourth individual that we meet as part of this band is A.Y. Jackson, whom the name might not be familiar to you, and truth be told, it never stood out to me. However, in the comic, he's noted as being a great navigations expert, as well as a cartographer, person who makes maps, and a little flamboyant with it for the general's liking. However, in reality, A.Y. Jackson is in fact one of the most prodigious Canadian artists out there. He was instrumental in forming the group of 7, and during his military service, after an injury, he was drafted into making portraits for the soldiers, and then he focused on landscapes and wartime memorials in 1919, and has for the rest of his life while he led the group of 7. So the next soldier that we meet is none other than Frederick Banting, and Mccray exclaims, "The foot doctor?" for having another physician on his squad of elite spec ops soldiers here. And in reality, Frederick Banting was quite an amazing soldier as well as physician. So he primarily volunteered and enlisted in hospitals and worked as a stretcher bearer. And his most noted and his greatest achievement, which earned him a medal, was that in northern France, in a battle where he was treating soldiers for wounds and casualties, he was in fact hit in the arm with a shell, but continued on for 16 hours treating soldiers, trying to keep them alive, and it ended up getting him a medal. After that, he would go on to be a prominent physician as well as scientist for Canada. The next soldier that we meet is Norman Bethune, whom John Mccray exclaims, "Another doctor," and he is in fact on loan from the British, we learn. And Bethune would go on to treat many soldiers and casualties across multiple battlefields in different wars, and is most noted for having invented the mobile transfusion unit, allowing on battlefield mobile transfusions to keep people alive with new blood. And finally, we have our last soldier in the group of 7, which is none other than Constantine Falkland Smythe. Now, I had never heard that name until I had read these comics, and I am genuinely impressed by this man. Again, another legendary hero in Canadian history, as well as one for Canadian culture. So, noted in the comic, he's known as a highly athletic man who is a great scrapper and back alley fighter, which makes him excellent in the trenches and able to fend off enemies. Now, in reality, that athleticism was true. In university, he was a part of his varsity hockey team and would go on to win a Canadian championship. From there, him and his teammates all enlisted in artillery, and during the course of battle, he would actually become the commander of his unit. Now, after that, he would transfer over to the Royal Flight Corps, where he would be an observer for artillery, before finally being captured, and for 14 months he was a POW. Now, once he was out of the war, this is where things get very interesting. So he comes back to Toronto, and he is instrumental in building Maple Leaf Gardens. For those of you who don't know, that's where the Toronto Maple Leafs play. He would also go on to be a founding member as well as co-owner of the Maple Leafs. And even after all that, when World War II broke out, he would re-enlist and get his own battalion of artillery fighters. And that is our legendary group of 7. Yes, creative licenses were taken for this story, of course, but these were all very real, very cool people that did amazing things to make their communities and their country proud. And one thing I love to point out about this, Jason Lapidus, the artist, as well as the writer Chris Sanagan, are uniquely qualified to be creating this book. So Chris Sanagan, while obviously a writer and author, is also employed with the Ontario government as an archivalist. So he deals with archival information all the time. And Jason Lapidus was a teacher at George Brown College for Communications. He also taught elementary school art and even taught comics at the Royal Ontario Museum, or ROM, for anyone in the GTA. So these two have come together to create a fantastical war story about bravery, heroism, and highlight real Canadian figures, which makes it super easy and accessible to get into Canadian history. And I must admit, to do the research for all these different characters, I was super pumped just to find out interesting things. And as I went down that list of characters, they kind of each got more and more interesting and just amazing. From some of our greatest writers to some of our most dedicated and amazing soldiers. This group is an all-star group, and the fact that they were truly living together at the same time and fighting in the same war is just astonishing. Now, when it comes to the book itself, the story is a military heist-esque story. So it reminds me of something along the lines of, say, Ocean's 11, as well as the movie Overlord, which just recently came out, that ties in the horrors of real war, the actual traumatizing nightmare that it is war, with fantastical notions of superhumans and things like that. And it also has a feel to it from something like Ocean's 11, where there's this charisma in these characters, and you kind of get swept up in their journey, and very quickly, as you rush through these 6 issues, you get brought on with them with this quest. You feel as though you're within the group. Now, one thing that is a challenge for a group like this that I think these creators tackled brilliantly is you have 7 main characters. 7. So having 1 or 2 main characters, that's easy enough. You can make them play off each other. Having 3 gets a little complex. But just like maybe with the movie The Hobbit, they had an overwhelming number of characters. So these 2 creators beat that challenge in an awesome and simple way. Each of the characters has a simplistic personality, and that's not a bad thing. So for instance, John Mccray, their leader, is calm, cool-headed, and thoughtful. Constantine Falkland Smythe is hot-headed, quick to fight authority, and in fact, when they first meet, he starts a fist fight with Mccray. And so all the characters become easily identifiable by their personalities. And Jason Lapidus' art is in this comic is simplistic. Um, Everyone, their clothes look very similar when it comes to the group of seven, and their faces are drawn simplistically, where a few key features are used to draw them out. So that way, even among the crowd of the seven, they all stand out individually. Whether it's someone who's got only facial hair, or a scar, or glasses, there's always a way that you can quickly identify this is that character, this is where they are. And when a fight breaks out, it's easy to coordinate who you're looking at. And further, the ability for Jason Lapidus' art to draw your eye is one that really caught my attention. There's a specific scene early on in the story where Peggy is lining up a shot with an enemy that's running away, and you have this breakdown of his shot. You see him sort of aiming his rifle. You then see the enemy running away, and each frame of this, it's a single long panel with smaller boxes, and each box gets individually smaller. So Peggy taking the aiming, the soldier running, the sight, you see the eye down the scope, soldier's getting further away, an exhale as Peggy takes a shot, and then immediately under it, in the same size as the large panel, you see the shot. And just the ability to guide your eye and build this tension so quickly, because it's just two small panels realistically, shows how talented these guys are in directing the panels and the page, as well as drawing it and illustrating it. And for those of you who aren't aware and you're curious, what does the art look like? The art looks something like this. So it's very simple. It's all black and white. I believe it might be it might be watercolor or gouache, but it's all done in gray tones and blacks and whites. And as you can see, each face, here we have Mccray, is done simply with just a few features highlighted, but you know who he is now. You know his face. And I feel like the art is in some way perhaps inspired by Jeff Lemire, but it's much more structured. Nothing breaks. The lines are solid always. And everything is just, frankly, it's solid art. I love it. And as mentioned, this is a hugely Canadian book, Canadian authors and writers, Canadian characters, Canadian history, with a creative license twist. And just to take it a step further, this is a small press book. So this is not something that you'll find at Midtown Comics in New York. Probably you'll have to come to the GTA to get it, or you can order it online actually at group-of-7comics.ca. They're coming out actually with a collection called Group of Seven, A Most Secret Tale. And I am impressed by their choices. So they took a lot of pride in this work, not only writing it and drawing it, which is extremely hard to do and put together and actually put this product out, but when they had it printed, they made the best choices possible. So as you'll see, the reflection here, the light from my light setup, this is actually a shiny covered book, and on the back we have more shine and a wicked dossier of one of the characters, this one being Lester B. Pearson, because it just looks cool, and all the comics have this on it except the last one. And I'm impressed. So as you can see, I'm just barely holding the edge of this comic, and it's staying upright. And let's tilt it. So why that matters is it's high quality. The paper in the book itself is really thick for a comic. Like if you pick up a random DC or Marvel book, it will be a lot thinner. It doesn't feel as sturdy, and frankly, it doesn't feel like it'll last. Like when I look at a comic book from DC or Marvel, or any other publisher really, my concern is always I need to protect it in order to keep it nice so I can display it or read it later. Frankly, while I will protect this book and it will go up in my display here, I don't feel the need to be worried about this book. It is strong, sturdy, it's got a hell of a body to it, and that's the case for all of the issues that I have. So everyone, clearly I love this book. I find the art is on point, it is consistent throughout, and it leads my eye, which is probably the biggest thing you can do in comics. The writing is solid, each character comes across well, it takes true historical events and adds in a fantastical twist to really draw in the reader into the story, and you even get to like the characters. Those two styles work extremely well, especially within this book. and I am excited for it. So that's full 3 stars. Genuinely, I sat down and crunched through this in 2 sittings, only because I had to go to work, frankly. I would have read all 6 if it wasn't for having to work. So you will absolutely be captivated by it. And I'm going to give this one a full 5 stars, because not only did it do all that, not only did I get a kick out of it, it made me as a Canadian feel proud of some of the history, the amazing Indigenous people, the European Canadians, and the work that they've done. And it made me want to research these characters, to know what they'd done in life, to figure out, what happened to Lester B. Pearson after the war, as well as Constantine, Pegamogabo, all of them. And I've never had a book make me want to do history research. Like, that's a big deal. And what it's going to do is do that for kids. And as a bonus, because this creative team is so awesome, if you're an educator of any kind, you can actually go out and contact them, and they will lead a little seminar for kids, or, well, frankly, probably adults if you want, in which they'll teach them not only about comics, but about history, and they'll help bridge these children to learn about our history, which I think is amazing. So, guys, again, absolutely 5 stars. Now, what you'll notice, and this is probably my only downside, this book doesn't feature any main female characters. It's all men. There is one character who's a woman who stars on the issue 5 cover, and she's within the book as well, and she becomes important to the story, but it's more of a cameo. And that was a little bit slight of a letdown once I'd finished reading it and I'd had a minute to think about it. What I am happy about is within that same issue, and if you look up their social media feeds, which I'll put here for you, Lapidus is actually working on a book called Peregrines, which looks like it's going to focus on a team of women in the war. So that's frankly fantastic, and I'm looking forward to it. So everyone, thank you very much for tuning in to Wednesday Night Reviews. This has been my review of Group of 7, issues 1 through 6. Again, you can get a collected edition called Group of 7, A Most Secret Tale, right from group of7comics.ca, or if you're in the GTA, you should be able to actually get a copy of it fairly soon, because it is coming to print. Do be sure to leave a like, a comment down below, and hit subscribe for more. That way you can catch me next time. Have a good one. Record more. Oh, don't break your camera, Konrad.